Hello, everybody. We missed you. I hope you missed us. And welcome back to Security Live, Special Edition, streaming from AWS Reinforce's Expo floor here in Philadelphia. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ryan Orsi, running a team of Cloud Foundation's partner specialists. It just means we dig into security and identity and cloud operations and all sorts of cool things with our AWS partners. And I'm joined by my other co-host.
Hey everyone, live from Philadelphia at Reinforce. This is Security Live. My name is Himanshu. I lead the team of our worldwide security, identity, and governance specialists. We are also subject matter experts who help customers and partners orchestrate their security outcomes. And speaking of customers and partners, we do have a partner here on the show who also helps our customers with their security outcomes.
Keith from Orca. Welcome. How are you?
Thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah,
allowing
good to
us
have you
to join. My name's Keith Mokris, VP of Marketing here at Orca Security, where we're focused on being a top partner with AWS, helping organizations around the world secure their cloud environments. Prior to being at Orca, I had opportunities to be at different startups in the mobile application security space, the container security and cloud space. And ultimately, it's amazing to be at AWS Reinforce today, having so many different conversations, with practitioners and security leaders about their strategy, for securing the cloud, which ultimately kind of, brings us into the show today where there's a lot to unpack.
Well, it's kind of fun, right? And Keith, was your career path just a straight shot out of high school, cybersecurity, straight in?
Absolutely not. I started out in nonprofit fundraising and essentially what we would call business development, which was an amazing lens into entrepreneurship and seeing how people built their own careers. And then I had the opportunity to kind of take those skills, get into tech, didn't know what I wanted to do, but ultimately kind of fell into cybersecurity, where I loved, working with talented coworkers who had research backgrounds, technical backgrounds, and then kind of being the ultimately product marketing translator, telling stories about those within the market, and have just, been in the cybersecurity space for 10 years. Not only do I love, the topics we uncover, but the people.
Oh, fantastic. And speaking of people and topics, Keith, just to remind you, YIELD's acronym swear jar. We like to feed it gold-plated 24 karat. That's why we've got this little armed guards ducked right behind this little pony wall behind me. But we spell it out within a reasonable amount of time, and or we feed the jar. Well, let's dive into it. Keith, tell us what's going on. I think Orca's got a great research team. Yes. Anything interesting from your security research lately?
Yeah, so I want to give a huge shout out to Bar Kaduri, our head of research, and the entire Orca research pod. Unfortunately, she's not able to be at AWS Reinforce today, but really excited to be the conduit to talk about their research, where over the last couple of quarters they analyzed over several billion cloud assets across multi-cloud environments to ultimately kind of uncover, what's kind of the state of risk in the cloud and what are some big themes that companies, whether they're, security leaders or practitioners, should be thinking about. And, excited to kind of unpack that research with you here and share some of the takeaways.
Very cool. And Keith, I think we talked about certain trends. In the previous segment, we had incident response teams talking about, IAM access keys and credentials, etc. What are some of the things that, in your research is surfacing that our audience and the customers should be aware of when it comes to security awareness?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things to understand is that we boiled some of the risks down to different themes. So certainly Gen AI was one of those themes. Year over year, how are organizations taking advantage of Gen AI from a business perspective? But what are the risks that they need to think about as Gen AI explodes across organizations, and especially AWS has a huge part in that. We looked at other, more specific areas like neglected assets, which we can dig into, non-human identities, and certainly other areas like vulnerabilities overall.
What is a neglected asset, Keith? It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound great.
Yeah, so neglected assets are essentially any part of a cloud environment, whether it's a virtual machine and the host OS that you've installed on top of it. It could be an identity. It could be another cloud asset or resource that ultimately you're not aware of. And so when we looked at 1 billion different cloud assets, we found that almost 1 in 3 is in a neglected state. So this might mean that a user hasn't connected to it in 30, 60, or 90 days. It could be that the host operating system is incredibly outdated and hasn't been updated in a reasonable amount of time. And the reason this is so important is because, number one, cloud hygiene is really important when it comes to security. So for example, this neglected asset might prevent present an incredible foothold for attackers to access other components across your cloud environment.
Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect. I think like maybe like analogy of this would be like back in the day, you'll have a root CA server sitting on a laptop stuck up in a closet somewhere, and then years later...
Root CA server?
Yeah, okay, acronym jar. that is a certificate authority, typically like, sitting on a machine that you now like hid in a closet. And like Keith highlighted, I think one of the best ways to do that would be scale that in the cloud. But now I think we're seeing resources in the cloud that are also dormant and not used. It could be like...
You wouldn't neglect your children, folks. Why do you neglect your root CA server? Sorry, I think I totally ruined his train of thought.
No, I think you covered it. But I think Keith was highlighting like these are dormant resources that could be sitting there in the cloud. Typically like part of your subscription or your overall payment plans as well, but something that you're not paying attention to, and hence leads to vulnerabilities or patches that might not be there. Is that
Absolutely. So 89% of neglected assets are public facing. And so, this is a huge risk to organizations because, again, an attacker could connect to that asset and then ultimately move around the environment. And so it's a big issue.
And what is Orca doing on the, so the research side, important to know, and you have a great purview on what's going on out there, but what is Orca doing on the proactive side, right, for our customers out there?
Yeah, so everything Orca's done is built around visibility combined with risk prioritization. And so we want to help organizations identify, prioritize, and remediate risks across all the different layers of the cloud technology stack. So whether it's your cloud infrastructure on AWS, your workloads and applications, your identities and entitlements, or your data, we want to do a lot of different things to really empower organizations to identify these risks, put their time where they're going to have the greatest risk impact in reducing that risk, and ultimately, scale their business in a really great way.
Sounds like you're able to help shape and prioritize where people spend their time as well, right? Right, Keith? I mean, this is something we talk about quite a bit in the security realm. Is you have a finite group of people in your security team, or maybe you don't have any. If you're a super small company or young startup, maybe that's something you're just like, I'm not going to worry about it yet, which I would encourage you to think about it. You don't have to always be in a worried state, but like prioritizing people in security teams on what's really the highest risk for their environment. How does Orca help prioritize that?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things with Orca is we connect ultimately to your AWS cloud accounts and can see everything connected at the cloud account level and up. And so this means that we can look at an S3 storage bucket, an RDS database, and see, is there PII or critical company information stored there, but also what is it connected to? So, are the identities that connect to that storage bucket set up with principle of least privilege? For example, do they then connect to a workload or application that has a critical vulnerability that's also exposed to the public internet? So the main idea with Orca is we want to provide you with this risk context across all these different layers of the cloud. And this is important because AWS allows you to scale in incredible ways for your business. We need to make sure that security teams can do that as well. And we've got a lot of organizations with lean but really effective security teams doing big things.
Very cool. It's like security that scales with the cloud, and then with the scale that the cloud brings in. You mentioned, least privilege access, which is one of the best practices that we recommend our customers as well. But as we know, like now we're morphing into an area where it's not necessarily humans who are behind that identity or that least privilege access. We see a lot of, I think you mentioned in your report also cited like non-human identities. Tell us more about where and how we are seeing the evolution of these non-human identities.
Sure. So non-human identities refers to service accounts, roles, or machine identities that ultimately aren't tied to a human the way you would think of a traditional user and potentially what I could do if I were a developer or DevOps engineer configuring things in the cloud.
It's not my AOL email address?
Well, it would be the extension of that, right? So what can you do with that AOL email address?
Awesome.
Yeah. And so, this is just ultimately another threat vector that attackers are looking at where some non-human identities could be in a neglected state or they could be overprivileged. The security themes around them are very similar to the other things that you might identify from other kind of threat impact type of analysis. But the main risk is that you've now got more and more components in the cloud that you need to worry about and make sure that you have some sort of automation to look at.
And I think it was Orca, I was reading this stat on here, Keith, but the quantity of machine identities relative to human identities, something more than 80 to 1 currently. It's rising. Why is it rising? Is that good? Is that bad? Or is it just something you need to be aware of?
Yeah, it's something to be aware of. I think the stat, is above at least 50 to 1. Regardless of the exact number, it's significant, right? So even if the three of us teamed up and tried to manage all these identities with spreadsheets and our best practices where we're on, a Zoom call all day managing all of this, we're not going to be able to without the right tools.
Very cool. And so I think the idea here is that, whatever principles and policies are applied to identities, regardless of where they're coming from, whether it's a human behind that identity or a machine behind that identity, following that good practices or the least privilege access policies is the key. And Keith, you mentioned there's a lot of visibility detections. Is there anything that is happening with regards to helping customers with that recommendation, providing them with that insights?
Yeah, so I think one of the big ones is thinking about how do you audit these things? And so how do you make sure that you're plugging in and using automation to manage all of these identities? Because again, if you have one that's over permissioned, it can connect to all these other pieces of your cloud environment.
And is automation good or bad, Keith?
In this one, it's good.
It's good?
You're just not going to be able to do it yourself, in a regular day's work.
Right, and I feel like in the olden days of maybe 4 or 5 years ago, automation was like the North Star, the dream. And maybe automated response is what we talk about a lot, right? Event has been true, positive, confirmed, something suspicious has happened. We want to change configuration to prevent said event from happening again. I think that's starting to happen already today. But with Orca, correct me if I'm wrong, you're able to get a more holistic response plan together. So what if your response was just block port? Okay, the network traffic is blocked, but what if something's already inside, moving around, right?
Yeah.
What can Orca do to detect that and help you get a more holistic response plan out there?
Yeah, so the big thing is we plug into a lot of different AWS security tools that already help you here, like Guard Duty, for example, or other CloudWatch log type of data. And so when we see something that's suspicious, Orca not only wants to alert on that, but we want to plug into the development team, the DevOps team, or the security incident response team and say, hey, not only is Orca detecting this.
Does DevOps count?
Yes. Absolutely.
DevOps is a well-known term, isn't it?
Wait.
Developer operations.
Mom, are you watching on the chat? Do you know what DevOps? She's probably thinking like it's a type of ticket you buy at an amusement park.
Our audience is going to correct you in the comments very soon.
Developer operations?
DevOps counts as an acronym or not.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I'm a Scrum offender. I'm a DevOps offender.
Yeah.
I'm really going to make friends with you all online today.
Yeah.
I was doing so well here, and then I feel like I just stepped into a landmine.
But going back to the point of automation, Keith, artificial intelligence has been playing a big role in helping automate and compress sort of like the times that it takes to correlate and aggregate this information, take actions. But on the flip side, I think your cloud security report also cites like how it's being actually leveraged by bad actors as well. Like, give us that lens from both these ends.
Yeah, and security teams have a ton that they need to worry about here as their organizations embrace Gen AI. You could certainly worry about vulnerable packages that are part of your AI packages, just like you would any sort of vulnerability. But attackers are using, Gen AI to look for, gaps in your infrastructure. There was a big story about how an organization was installing crypto miners in Jupyter notebooks because they were exposed via, I think, an insecure MCP server. That's a technology in its infancy that, a lot of people are embracing, but could potentially present huge gaps. And I think a coin has to come out here.
Yes. MCP, anyone? MCP?
Model Context Protocol.
Model Context Protocol,
yes. Kind of like the USB port for AI agents to plug into outside data sources and pull in more information.
I like that analogy.
Like
I'm going to use
that?
that one.
I like how Ryan easily slipped in an acronym while explaining an acronym. He's like, Model Context Protocol, is like the USB.
That's why you guys are the professionals.
Okay, hang on. I think my mom knows what USB is. That's the bar here, okay?
So it has to be just long enough in prevalence for everybody to know what it is. And
30
like Keith
years,
mentioned,
40 years,
yeah,
I think you're good.
Model context protocols is pretty new and evolving term. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I worked with someone who was one of the inventors of USB, and I was like, this is one of the best
No way.
introductory flexes in the tech space. I was like, that's impressive.
That is
I got
very,
nothing on that.
That's a big shoe to fill.
Yeah.
So yeah, Keith, help us model context protocols and then agents talking to each other. Is that where we're going here?
Yeah, so Model Context Protocol is a new technology that ultimately makes Gen AI more accessible. It's like an API or an industry standard like USB for accessing this data with different Gen AI services. Here's the challenge. Attackers understand that everyone's gravitating to this technology, and they're looking to see if it's not authenticated properly, right? So this is broken authentication providing a foothold, just like it would for a business application or another part of the internet.
These are API calls. Right, Keith?
Ultimately, that's how I would explain it.
Ultimately, that's how I visualize it too. But I mean, so it doesn't have to be so scary. It's new, right? But it doesn't have to be so scary. It's a kind of communication you would understand just developing applications and calling APIs. But I think the difference here is the quantity of data and the speed at which data is created and moved around, right? So from Orca's perspective, data security, where that personal identifiable information may be located. What are you able to help folks out on their data side of things?
Yeah, so ultimately, data exposure is one of the biggest issues anyone would face in the cloud. And I think everyone would agree that's like the foundational business intelligence layer that people are thinking about. And Orca wants to essentially pull in data exposure and data risks into our ultimate unified data model to look for exposure. And so we can identify things like PII within your storage buckets or databases, but in context of all the other assets and components that it would touch. So for us, it's always how do we pull it together and show it in an interconnected way?
Very cool. And I think like this is where you earlier highlighted how identities or machine identities are playing a role. So if it's all APIs, then the communication to and from needs to include some authentication that will come from machines. So yeah, we're very relevant. What's next for Orca, Keith? Like, where are we headed with regards to the shift in the security paradigm? There's a lot of talk about like helping developers, like, you know, which is where all the journey starts, of building these applications to also make sure that we are like keeping them secure or like not making mistakes to begin with. So walk us through a non-acronym, DevOps, and that experience. Like, you know, what is Orca's role there?
Yeah, and I think this is a huge challenge because security teams always feel like they're not the ones that can fix the risks or vulnerabilities that they're identifying. And organizations now understand, like, developers hold so much power and responsibility for the security of applications. And so plugging security into not only their workflows, but their toolkits, but then showing them what does this look like when it's deployed in the cloud. I think a lot of really good security organizations are doing workshops between developers and security teams, hackathons, even some organizations where they fix bugs together in some sort of regular cadence, you know, bi-weekly, once a month, or even weekly, because they all want to make sure that they're on the same team improving this.
Is that what it means to plug security into developers too, Keith? I've just been looking for more, like, you know, I love how you said it, right? Exposing the visual to a developer inside maybe their development environment when they're writing their code. What will happen if you include this library?
Yeah, I think this is something that's really exciting when I come to events. You know, we'll have developers come to our booth and say, you know, I might use Orca Security to do code scanning.
Yeah.
But I don't see all the other areas of the product because I just see the vulnerability results or the scan results as part of my pipeline. I want to understand the context. And good security teams are finding ways to show that to developers. And then ultimately they feel, you know, more excited to release secure code. Like, they want to go build, they don't want to worry about security loopholes.
Very nice. Hey, speaking of cool things, I know what's on the horizon here is the main event for Inforce, which is keynote by our AWS Chief Information Security Officer, Amy Herzogs. And I'm really excited for that because that is what sets the theme for all new things today.
I think she's doing quite a few announcements on the AWS side. So there might be some partner announcements from our friend Justin Brindley-Kuntz, who's the VP of the Specialist Org that we're a part of. And that's coming up very quickly. How quickly?
About
29 seconds, 28 seconds.
10 minutes. So for the audience, please tune into the keynote for Reinforce. And then after that, tune back into Security Live.
That's right. We'll be taking a bit of a break here. You all are going to jump over to the Reinforce keynote, and then we can finally speak openly about all the amazing launches that are being announced in that keynote. Keith from Orca, thank you so much for joining us here. We really appreciated your conversation and time today. Folks, see you after the keynote. We'll be right back.